Hey guys, hope everybody is doing well and staying safe. I'm going to start class with some announcements. First of all, be sure to get your annotated bibliography submitted. That's due today, Thursday, by the end of the day. If you need an extension, no problem, just let me know. The annotated bibliography is a really essential step to writing the call to action paper because you need to find your sources first before you start writing. The sources build the foundation of the paper. They let you know what other people are saying about your chosen community and issue. So make sure that you get that done before you move to the next step of the writing process. And if you have questions, let me know. The Writing Center is open. You can email citytechwritingcenter@gmail.com to make an appointment. You may want to do that as we get closer to submitting the call to action paper. I can work with you, or one of the other tutors can also work with you. And a coworker of mine at the Writing Center has an opportunity for New York artists. She's organizing a live stream. I'm going to post the details down in the description of the video, but if you're interested, you could check that out. Okay, objectives for today. This is going to be a shorter video since we have a short amount of time between today, Thursday, and next week. So I'm going to discuss some of the common elements of MLA research papers and opinion pieces. Remember that you're picking just one of these genres for your call to action paper. You don't want to blend the two. You want to abide by the common elements of the one that you choose. And I'm going to talk about the next step after finding your sources, and that's either an outline or a shitty first draft. So I'm only going to address some of the common elements today of each of these genres, just so that you have enough so that you can get started with the next step. And then next week, when I put out the lecture video, I'll go into even more detail of things like MLA in-text citations, hyperlinks for opinion pieces, stuff like that. This is just to get you guys going for the sort of initial drafting, brainstorming stage of the paper. Okay, so let's start by talking about some common elements of MLA research papers. First of all, you're going to need to have a thesis at the end of the first paragraph, and that thesis should be, what is your solution to the issue? So you start your research project thinking about this community and the issue. After doing your research, you're going to put forward a solution, and that solution should be really obvious at the end of your first paragraph. That's the thesis spot. As we talked about when we had in-person classes, MLA research papers have longer body paragraphs, starting with a topic sentence and then within the body paragraph using support from your evidence, from your sources, and then backing up that support with information and analysis from you. Body paragraphs should use direct quotes and MLA in-text citations, and you want to use this strategy called they say, I say in your body paragraphs. I'm going to go to a rough ride, no one cares how you get there, paper that we read in class to sort of demonstrate each of these common elements. But if you are writing a research paper, I would write down these common elements so that you have them for getting started with your paper. So let me go to the paper. Okay, so the first thing is the thesis, right? I want to point that out. So at the end of the first paragraph, this student has introduced the community and the issue, which is CUNY students and the cost of transportation. And here we have this sentence that I highlighted. Therefore, these students should receive free Metro cards as long as they maintain good grades. So this student has put forward their intended solution right there in that sentence. And then later in the paper, they go into more detail about how that's going to work. But everything in the paper sort of goes back to this main idea of giving the free Metro cards to the students. So if you're writing a research paper, you should have a thesis that does the same. Longer body paragraphs, if you compare this research paper to the profiles that we read or the opinion pieces, you'll notice their length. That's part of the style. Another common feature of MLA papers is direct quotes. So MLA is the citation style used in the humanities, in English, history, stuff like that. So you're going to be using direct quotes more than summary or paraphrasing. So here's a good example. So we have the first time that the writer introduces a source, they say their name, they say the source that it comes from, and they have the quote, and then they say the author's name and the page number in a in-text citation. So you're going to want to prioritize doing these kinds of quotes as well. And the other thing is this idea of they say, I say, right? So they say, I say means that you use a quote, you use a source, and that's what they say. That's what someone else says about an issue. And then what you say after the quote is, I say. So, for example, here we have the they say is the quote from the psychology textbook, and the I say is this sentence that I've highlighted. So what they're doing here, let me just highlight the whole thing. What they're doing here is bring in the quote, that's the they say, and then they're using the I say to connect it to the thesis. So if I read these two sentences, it says, Dr. Myers, the author of Exploring Psychology, states, biologically speaking, life's purpose is not happiness, but survival and reproduction. And then the student says, the expense of transportation conflicts with the needs for an individual's survival, right? So they've taken what the author says and then they have connected it to the thesis. Anytime you use a quote like this, you want to follow it up with connecting it. You never want to leave a paragraph with ending with someone else's quote. You always want to have the I say part of it. The I say part can agree, disagree, expand upon someone's ideas, but you always want to follow up on someone else's ideas with your own in a research paper, because that's what a research paper is really all about, is finding sources that talk about the same thing that you're interested in and adding more to this conversation. All right. Next, let's take a look at some common elements for opinion pieces. So they do not have a thesis. Generally, they lay out the issue first and then the solution later in the piece. They have shorter body paragraphs, and rather than direct quotes, they more commonly have a short summary of the source with a hyperlink so that the reader can click on the hyperlink and read that source if they want to. So let me show you guys that in our opinion piece that we read in class. So we read New York subways needed independent MTA. Notice here that the solution to the problem is right there in the title, right? But if we go to the beginning of the piece, they don't have a thesis. They don't have a sentence that puts forward the main idea. Instead, they lay out the issue, right? So they start with this idea, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority is in a state of crisis. And then they expand on that crisis. What's going on? What's the problem? Where did it come from? What's the history? And then it's really not until we get to the end of the article that they start to put forward the solutions. So here you notice they say the first step toward reforming the transportation system is to restore the independence of the MTA management. And then they lay out a couple other solutions as well, right? So an opinion piece is way more likely to establish problem solution, whereas a research paper is going to have the solution right there at the beginning in that thesis, and then have body paragraphs that support the thesis. Short body paragraphs in an opinion piece, very similar to the profiles that we read in terms of length. And the big thing with sources, let me go up to a place where there's some sources, is that instead of using quotes, they just do a really short summary of the source and then a link. So in the paper version of the course reader that you guys had, it was just underlined because it was paper version. But when it's online, you can click the link and it takes you to the source. So this is an old article about the fact that Cuomo's dad, when he was governor, pushed the legislature to be in charge of the MTA, right? So if you're writing an opinion piece, you are going to be doing this. You're going to be including hyperlinks to your source. And I'll talk more about hyperlinks when I put out the lecture video for next week. All right, some other things to consider. Whichever genre you choose, so that's opinion piece or research paper, the community, issue, and proposed solution should be clear and specific. So that's what I'm going to be really looking for when I read your papers is it obvious which community and issue you're talking about, and do you put forward a proposed solution in your paper? Either in the thesis, if it's a research paper, or eventually towards the end of the opinion piece, do you put forward a solution? Keep in mind that this doesn't have to be a solution that's actually going to happen, right? This is just based on your research, your opinion, where you've gotten with this paper, but it doesn't have to be something that actually, comes to fruition. Introduction strategies, we've talked about this for other papers, but it's applicable here. Begin with a moment, a story, an attention-grabbing idea. Something that grabs the reader right from the beginning is a useful introduction. It can look different depending on what you are writing about, but to give you an example, remember our student research paper started with this sentence. Consider a full-time student attending college and braving the hectic mass transit system of New York City to commute to and from school as a daily routine during a 15-week semester, right? So they're illustrating a moment there, and they go on to give more details about that. I want you to do the same in your introduction. Similarly, we've talked about some conclusion strategies, but it sort of rings true here as well. Why does this matter? Why should we care? How will your proposed solution help solve this community's issue, right? So the conclusion is not just about restating what you've already said. It's about saying why this matters, showing the implications. And think about audience. Writing for an academic audience, which is the research paper, versus a newspaper audience, which is the opinion piece, affects your writing style. It changes your tone, your voice, the amount of detail. So think about that as you get started with this paper. What do I do with my sources? So the idea is that you've written this annotated bibliography, right? And that you have these 3 sources. Now, what do you do with them to turn them into a paper? One big thing is that you're going to have to really read and take notes on your sources and make sure that you feel really good about what they're saying. If you have a long source, like a book-length source, still read strategically, find the places that really matter, like the introduction, the conclusion, look at the subheadings and stuff like that to find what you need. But when you find those chunks that you need for the paper, make sure that you're really engaging with them and taking notes. After that, for a research paper, you want to consider the key quotes that you want to use, especially because we're using MLA, right? So find out what those quotes are, pull them out. Quotes should only be about a sentence long. For this length of paper, you don't need to pull any block quotes, right? So pull the most important information. And consider your they say, I say for each quote. When you pull a quote, that's the they say. What are you going to say about it? How are you going to talk about that quote and connect it to your thesis after you include the quote? And for an opinion piece, identify the main idea of the source and how it relates to your opinion piece. So that main idea is going to be the short summary part that you hyperlink. And again, I'm going to go into more details with my next lecture video. This is just to get you guys thinking. Next steps. So for next week, I want you to post a shitty first draft or an outline of your paper on the discussion board. I know I said that I was going to do 2 discussion boards per week, but we have a pretty quick turnaround. So 1 discussion board, 1 assignment. Just watch this video, do some work on your paper, post what you have done, okay? For my Monday, Wednesday classes, the next video will come up on Monday at 5. For my Tuesday class, the next video will come up on Tuesday at 6, and I'll expect your shitty first draft or your outline by that time, by whenever I put out the video for your class, okay? Hope everybody is staying safe, and I will post another video next week. Looking forward to seeing what you guys do with this paper.